what? This is a real treat for me today. I'm really excited to introduce my friend, Rich Robinson. Welcome, Rich.
Oh, great to be with you, Phil. Looking forward to it.
So tell people a little bit about who you are. Actually, let me just tell you one story about you from when I was up in Sheffield, because I remember we used to go up there to learn a little bit about missional communities. And so everything I've learned is from you. Thanks, Rich. You did a great job. We doubled, I think, the church through missional communities in over a few years, and that was amazing. And but what I do remember is this one phrase. It's just that you were really good at normalizing the chaos, of change. And I just remember that about you. You're just so calm in the midst of change and complexity, and saying, this is totally normal at this phase, at this place, Phil. I remember that phrase.
Don't panic. Yeah, don't panic.
Basically, keep calm.
Yeah, I've heard that slogan somewhere before. Yeah, it's great to be reconnected and back with you, Phil. Definitely. So my married nearly 20 years, living in Edinburgh. We've been in Edinburgh for coming up to 7 years now. Previously, as you'd mentioned, in Sheffield for 20. Came to faith in a missional community around the table with a bunch of uni guys and girls who love Jesus, love sport. And so my formation through my 20s was missional communities, intentional and incarnational discipleship. And so that was sort of normative for me, and made the decision late 20s, early 30s to say, how do I help others to make that normal for them? So not a badge and a brand or a system, but actually really reading scripture, living scripture, being missional disciples. So every person of the people of God mobilized, living into their calling, their gifting, and wherever that is, where they work, rest and play. So had the privilege of building out using the 3DM toolkit, lots of discipleship training across different parts of the globe. So a decade really of coming alongside leaders like yourself who had the vision, the passion, the sort of charism to step out, and a bit of courage there as well to try and mobilize their people into mission. And then in the last 6-7 years, two parts to my world. One is the Movement Leaders Collective. So co-founder with Alan Hirsch, and so Alan wrote in The Forgotten Ways around 6 elements of movement. So MDNA, movement DNA. So these, Jesus is Lord at the center. So Jesus movements, Jesus people, discipleship and disciple making. So your background, my background, missional incarnational impulse. So the impulse to go out and the commitment to go deep and to stay within culture and context. APEST, Fivefold ministry, Ephesians, we'll talk a little bit about today. So people understanding themselves, playing their part, and together pursuing maturity. Organic systems, so simple, scalable, reproducible, self-replicating, and then liminality, communitas, risk, displacement, exile, the challenge and the frame of a challenge or a cause, and together the community or camaraderie, communitas around it. So around those 6 elements, what we've tried to build is a peer learning platform for church leaders, denominational leaders, movement leaders who are able to basically share their best practice and biggest problems. So how do we work together to work out this adaptive challenge we're in, and then creating training and resources to help every leader and every church move into the more missional mode and of movemental Christianity. And then my other side of the world is a similar sense of releasing kingdom potential, but with Christian entrepreneurs. So any age, any stage, so ideas through to launch, through to exist, to scale, really trying to connect, train and resource Christian entrepreneurs to advance the common good. So faith made real on a Monday morning, a Tuesday afternoon, in their work, rest and play, whatever it is. So some may be planting and starting sort of their co-vocational church planters, or their social entrepreneurs, their businessmen and women. So it's an integrated faith that's real in the world and making a tangible kingdom impact. So we're working alongside those wonderful men and women of faith as well. So I have the joy, Phil, of meeting amazing people, helping them to clarify their dream, and then giving them the courage, the frameworks, and the support, whatever that looks like, to help them put it into practice. So that's a little bit of me.
Wow, that sounds like you're keeping busy, mate. That sounds amazing.
Yeah. Just a little.
I'd love you to basically just write my job description. That sounds like a dream job description to me. I just love it. You have the job that I think I would quite like. So if you know,
I think you'd be good at it as well, Phil.
We aspire, but we're really blessed by what you're doing. So mate, what's happening at the moment, what we're looking at with London, and as we're looking at the incredible changing kind of landscape in church and in society, I'm just wondering what it is that you particularly see as happening, that you feel we can begin to, we're going to talk about APEST in a minute in a particular way, because I think that is one of the key tools that we're really excited about developing and digging deeper on, because we've realized that those 5 ministries, those 5 gifts and callings are the key to seeing such health and fruit in so many environments. And even talking to people in society at every level, you find those gifts out there, don't you? And I do love the way that broadens out certainly for me, broadened out my understanding of the fivefold in a lovely way. But we'll get to that in a minute. But what do you see happening in society through all the changes that have been happening? What would be your big go-to at the moment?
I would say that sort of two sides to one coin. So what I see is this great disruption. So disruption around people's worldview, their relationships, their systems and organization. So there's a real disruption. And the reality is uncertainty was always present pre-COVID, but we are more aware of our uncertainties, and ambiguity or stress within systems was already present. So COVID, yes, has brought some disruption, some challenge, some stress into the system, 110%, absolutely. But actually what it's also done is just exposed what was already there, but we weren't aware of it, or we pushed it to the side, or we pushed it down. So one thing I see is this great disruption, sort of almost a cultural earthquake, organizational earthquake, personal earthquake. And in that, disruption can be a friend or an enemy. I see a lot of people try and survive it or deny it, or just kind of hold on to what exists and kind of grab a deck chair or grab something in the water and just sort of hang on. And then I see others that are saying, within this disruption, how am I finding God, seeing God? It's not all good, but God is still God. And what is he seeking to reveal, speak, change, spark? So there's a disruption going on. And I think what excites me, and I am a visionary, a pioneer, a strategist, a futurist, I love these moments, but also absolutely recognize that not everyone feels as excited as I do. So it's not sort of everything's sort of unicorns and roses and candy floss, but in it, there's a sense for me of it's unlocking dreams in people, deep things that are buried, hopes, dreams, causes, possibilities, heroism, kind of men and women stepping into something that's in them that they didn't realize that was there. So I see this sort of pain and possibility moments, two sides of one coin. There's a real stress in the system, a tiredness and attrition and uncertainty, but there is also an elasticity and a potential for an individual or for an organization in this moment. So not throw everything out and start again, do a new COVID plan, but actually just to say, well, let's reflect on who we are. Why do we exist? What are we about? Who are we trying to serve? What's the difference we're trying to make in the world? And there's a moment there for us to almost remember who we are as individuals or as leaders or as organizations, and just to recommit and reimagine what a future may look like.
Brilliant. I mean, it seems to me, as you were just describing different people's reactions to the current situation, that it's almost a good segue straight into the fivefold in some ways, isn't it? Because it feels like people react out of a particular gift and call and temperament, and observe. We all do that because that's the way we are. And as I think similarly to you, I'm a bit of a futurist, so I thrive in the future. I often introduce my wife Julie as the time traveler's wife, because she basically sees me occasionally, I just kind of drop into the present and
say hi and then off again.
Yeah. But yeah, so thankful to her. She keeps my feet on the ground. But the key, I think, is it's interesting to see those different responses to the present and to the challenge and the disruption, the great disruption, as you put it. I do think it's part of it. So why don't we look at the fivefold through that lens and say, how, as we're just reacting, responding, particularly at this point, how do you identify the strengths of those 5 different gifts and callings coming together in this current moment?
Great question, Phil. And every one of these 5 has a strength and has a weakness that we have to be aware of. So there's none that are better or worse or more important, less important. We need each other. It's a teamwork. It's a team sport, not the sort of individual superstar. So when we think of the fivefold, the apostolic, prophetic, evangelistic, shepherding and teaching, all of these are seen in Jesus. So the apostolic, the new frames, the new frontiers, the impact, the impetus to go beyond, the prophetic, the fullness, covenant identity, the fidelity to God, but also the out and indexed to the margins, the forgotten, the orphan, the widow, the lonely, the evangelist that sort of mobilizes people towards mission and towards the mission field and out there in the world is looking to connect and message and encourage and invite those that don't yet know Jesus. Shepherd guards, guides community, builds the relational depth and texture and integrity and helps people together and individually to pursue wholeness and health. And then the teacher, the wisdom, the ideas, the integration of truth and thoughts, read the signs of the times and communicate and also embed truth within the church. All of those, absolutely, you're right, Phil, have a kind of positive and negative experience of the last couple of years and the disruption of COVID. So the apostolic, the one who is sent, the opportunity that this disruption creates, the apostle and the apostolic type gets excited by it, sort of new forms, new frontiers, new possibilities, innovation. So there's a drive there that's really good. The downside of the apostolic is they're so excited about the change, the possibility, the new, they miss the empathy, sympathy, relationship, the pace. They can burn themselves out with 19 new COVID plans by Christmas, all of that kind of stuff. The prophet, looking for how do we remain faithful within this disruption, and also remembering those that are, I remember somebody saying, we're all in the same storm, but we're not all in the same boat. There's some of us that have these ginormous boats that we are buffeted. There's other people in a little dinghy or a kind of almost a tin cap that are just hanging on for dear life. So the prophet reminds us of those on the margins, those are forgotten. So again, there's a real strength of, you may feel disrupted, but let's remember the last, the least, and the lost. And actually, even in the stress, how do you remain faithful? The challenge for the prophet is they can be overwhelmed by the empathy that God gives or that they feel. So that the pain and the disruption is a heavy weight for the prophet to wear and to carry. The evangelist sees the opportunity and the urgency. People are displaced, they're unsettled, they're searching, they're looking for answers, they're more spiritual. And so the evangelist is the one saying, never waste a crisis, sort of let's make the opportunity count, let's be good news, get out there, and mobilizing people. So again, we need those types of people in the last couple of years and the next couple of years to be active and messengers. And but also the danger is they're so busy sending everyone and meeting everyone's need, they're just stretching and stressing the system. That the shepherd, wonderful, godly, loving, caring, sort of the isolation, the pain, the loss, the doubt, the deficit, being able to sit with somebody, look them in the eye, love them into relationship with Jesus or love them into wholeness. That's massive, hugely significant in this displaced and disrupted world, to have a non-anxious presence that's committed to Jesus and the person across the table. Massive. But again, the pain of this moment can really be a huge sort of too much water in the cup for a shepherd. So they feel everything and everyone's pain. It's a tough time. And in terms of the teacher, I often said when we were in lockdown and the rules were changing and could you do this, could you do that, said if you want to know what the most up-to-date regulations and restrictions are, find a base ministry teacher. They'll have read the news, they'll have read the articles, they'll have watched the press conference, they'll tell you exactly what you can do, you can't do, you should do, you shouldn't do. So the teacher is the one that's reading signs of the time, understanding the threads, the themes, the trends, and is helping people to find a biblical perspective, not necessarily just personal worldview or emotion or circumstance. They're actually finding truth in the midst of trauma or change or upset. So each of these five, Phil, have a sort of strength and a shadow in this moment. And again, it's always been the case, any situation, if you think about putting a glass of water in the middle of a table, if you look at it from five different perspectives around the room, you're going to see the same object in five slightly different ways, the different light, the different backdrops. And so it's understanding, I need you to be me, you need me to be you. We together have a more Christ-like perspective than I have my narrow niche and window of how I see the world and what I feel is important.
Wow, that's a great, wonderful, colourful picture you just painted there of all the fivefold coming into great kind of both the strengths and the weaknesses. It's true, you know, I've seen the pastors almost crushed under the weight of the concerns for people, and my heart goes out to them. You know, having planted years ago, and obviously was called pastor for many years. I'm one of those people that's kind of taken a long time to discover where I sit in the fivefold, and it just, you know, because I hung out with evangelists for the first several years because I became a Christian through Youth for Christ, and they were all bunched around the area where I was living, and would take me on trips and all that sort of thing. So I thought I was an evangelist for the first probably 8 to 10 years. And until we planted a church, and then everybody started calling me pastor, and it's because that's what people do. And you know, well, I wasn't the pastor. My wife's the pastor. But you know, between the two of us, I don't think that. So there's often this institutional mindset, isn't there, that the fivefold get pushed on to you as a particular label that may not necessarily be who you are. I wonder what you've got to say about that. That would be just interesting.
You're definitely right, Phil. We have caricatures, so we have sort of images of what an apostle is or what a prophet is, what an evangelist is. So we have unhelpful mental sort of cartoons would be one thing. We definitely have a drift towards this happens within the institution, these roles. So you teach and you preach and you feed, and so there's structures, there's language, there's heritage. So absolutely, we can end up in a place that's not helpful. What we talk about, one of the things we almost always start the training with is we say APEST is not an excuse, it's not a box, and it's not a title. So it's not an excuse. So if I'm apostolic, it's not an excuse for me not to love people, or if I'm prophetic, it's not an excuse to not be rooted in scripture. So if I'm using it as an excuse to basically mask my immaturity, that's not what we're talking about here. It's not a box. It's not, you are an evangelist, you can only do this and forever you shall be. So it's not boxing yourself or others of what you're capable of, and it's not a title. The minute we start elevating and prioritizing sort of this is more important than this, that you're in trouble, because all five of these are found in the person of Jesus. All five of these dynamics were gifted and given to the church, it says in Ephesians, communal, and then individually we express these five. So I talk about them sometimes as the thumbprint of Christ upon us as disciples. So it's not just a few equipping and task, like I am an apostle to do a job. It's far more identity, worldview, passion, drive, and you have some that you're stronger in and some that you're weaker in, because if I just pick the one I'm strong in and I sort of reduce down, my shepherd is quite low, my prophet is quite low. And if I don't attend to them, I'm forming Christ in my image, like he looks exactly like me or suspiciously like me, rather than allowing Jesus to transform and conform me into his likeness, which is, I need to grow as the good shepherd, even if it's not natural to me. I need to be listening to God ideas, not just Rich's good ideas, with the prophet and the prophetic. And I need others to challenge me. So seeing APEST as discipleship, pursuing maturity, both strengthen our shadows, leadership, how do we understand ourselves to release potential in others? And APEST can be health and growth for a team or a church, because they're 5 communal expressions which are really healthy and helpful for us to be Christ-like. So yeah, we try and take people on a journey to unlearn and then relearn sort of discipleship, leadership, and community.
That's awesome. And I just think the process of tying in maturity with the process of calling and gifting is the key, isn't it? Here, so it's not about there's one journey to be had. It is to do with that complexity of what's God given us, what's God put in our hands, how has he given us and called us, what's been our unique story and journey in shaping all of that, and how do then we offer that back to God in a way that takes us into Christ-likeness and service in a way that is so that we're servant leaders and not something other, which is a bit scary.
Well, definitely. And you use the term servant leader, that we have to remember in the 21st century, we come at scripture with a individualistic consumer mindset of, what did I get? How am I the hero? And how does the church help me to be the star? But the Ephesian church, the network of house churches, the sort of slave and free, male and female, young and old, they had a communal worldview and a familial worldview. So it wasn't, what did I get, which slice of the cake, and how am I the hero? It was, how do I play my part in us pursuing maturity, and how do we grow, not it's about me. So absolutely, that's one of the unlearning and relearning, is these aren't just sort of things you're good at to be a star and important. They are gifting, worldview, dynamics that you can invest for the good of others, to help others to become more Christ-like and in community. And yes, ultimately you, but it's not you first and everyone else behind you. It's the other way around, definitely.
Brilliant. Let's dig on that one a little bit, because I think in terms of building teams and building contexts in which we see the church grow, it may be a fresh concept, it may be an old concept to certain listeners, but just how do you see the best way of people going around connecting with people who are not their primary gift and call? How do you see that happening, particularly in our individualistic society, as you say? There aren't that many contexts, natural contexts, in which you're encouraged to do that. So you have to be absolutely intentional about it, don't you?
Oh, yeah. Oh, totally. You do, Phil. And I think where you finish is probably where I'd start. You have to be intentional. It doesn't happen by accident. It needs some design. So the saying, like attracts like. The danger is, if we're not intentional, we attract the people that are like us, and we like the people that are like us, and we create a team that looks a lot like us. And so we have wonderful strengths together and glaring blind spots that come back to bite us. So we have to actually have a Jesus-centric picture for our team. So absolutely, you need good character, some chemistry, a sense of sort of vision and calling. So all of those have to be present. But you're also looking for, how do we have a Christ-like team? And so it isn't as formulaic as we get 5 people, they each have one hat, one t-shirt, one job, and we outsource each to each. So we're not talking about employ an apostle, employ a prophet, and make it a formula. What we're looking for is, however many people you have on your team, 3 through to 13, what you're looking for is to say, how are we embracing the apostolic? So some within the team might have that as a primary gift, a strong apostolic. Great. But actually, they probably need to talk last rather than first. And together, let's discern, where's the place of innovation? Where's the opportunity for risk? Where are we stretching and growing? So as a team, you're engaging in the apostolic, but you've got 1 or 2 guides and champions in the conversation. The same in the prophetic. It's not, let's outsource the function of listening to God to the one prophet in the room and sort of, they'll dial up, get the download and share it with us. It's, how do we as a team learn to listen, learn to look for where God's at work, learn to actually index ourselves to the margin rather than the center, and vulnerability rather than power. And so again, it may be there's 1 or 2 that are quite strong in the prophetic, but with team effort, not outsourcing functions. And the same goes around, Phil. So any decision, you can put a decision in the middle of the room and the table and go, what are the 5 perspectives? What are we missing? And again, if you've got a team that's made up of mostly sort of primary or secondary, the first or second of the 5 are apostle, prophet, evangelist, we're going to lean there. But as a team leader, you need to say, right, this is where the conversation's going, 3 of the 5. Let's think about the shepherding lens or the shepherding voice. So let's think about the people. How will they feel when we make this decision? What's the pace that we're setting as we go forward? Is this too much, too soon, too quick? Have we actually helped people to own the decision? What are the implications? ... Teacher, the same. So you're looking as a team leader to, yes, identify the strengths of the people in the room on your team, totally. But you're looking for a more holistic conversation, strategy, decision-making process. And honestly, whatever your denominational structure, you can have fivefold conversations and dynamics within Anglican, Baptist, Methodist, Free Church and beyond, a micro church through to a mega church. The structure that's important, it's the culture, the dynamics and the interactions that are important.
Brilliant. I love that. That's very practical, because if you're establishing that in the conversation and the way you lead, then each of those 5 giftings and callings are going to come to bear on every situation, as you say, and you're setting a pattern and a rhythm that means that you're overcoming the blind spots, the potential blind spots. Love it.
And you said, Phil, way back at the start, sounds like you're keeping yourself busy or something to that effect. And I am naturally apostolic and evangelistic. They're my 2 strongest. And so I will naturally create an environment that is, I talk about it being exhilarating and exhausting all at once. So there's opportunity, there's potential, there's frontiers. We could help here, we could start this, we could. And the reality is, I've needed to set accountability, community, and intentionality around me in the shepherding, in the prophet. So it's not just what we could do, apostolic energy, but it's what we should do, prophetic insight. Where is God leading rather than where does Rich disappear off to as a horizon? And in terms of the shepherding is accountability and pace around sort of how much we do, when we do it, what we do it, the implications on others, because ultimately it's often my family and my team that will pay the price before I will realize and pay the price. So my responsibility is to honor my wife, my kids and my team, not just live in my natural instincts and then turn around and there's carnage behind me. So for me, the apostolic evangelistic understanding myself is, yes, I can leverage my strength for the kingdom, but ultimately I'm actually mitigating and trying to mature in my weakness, which is probably more important, I would say. As the older I get, the more I realize that that's probably the space I need to attend to far more than the natural strengths.
Yeah, likewise, so doing the quiet days and just retreating and listening and going off grid. The danger is that you get more ideas, but But
that is true. That is true.
but learning Sabbath has been the big journey for us for the last 10 years, definitely. Practicing, digging deeper into rest, trusting, and laying aside the things and basically saying to God, I can't do this. I know that I think I can, but I know I actually can't. And actually, that's for just a discipline, isn't it? For I guess for the apostolic.
Hugely. And there's different disciplines for the different fivefold. So again, as you know yourself, the prophet, for instance, the prophet that would tend towards the margins and the edge, their discipline may be to stop, to pray, to reflect. The prophet that tends more towards prayer, intimacy, worship, their discipline may be to activate and to ground some of the worship. So again, knowing ourselves, the disciplines to become more Christ-like, hugely significant, Phil. And I think circling back to your question of sort of what do you feel like God's doing in the church in the moment, I think the self-awareness that's coming in the disruption is really helpful, because a lot of the pressures or burnouts or struggles or stresses within the system or for leaders, a lot of it, not all of it, it's not as simplistic, but if we know ourselves and we know some of the realistic, I can do this, I can't do this, this gives me life, this drains me, there's accountability around my weakness, there's intentionality. If we're understanding that world, we're crafting a more Christ-like, but also a more sustainable world, rather than trying to sort of write with your weaker hand or try and drive with a blindfold or try and work out where to go after you've got in the car. So I think the self-awareness that's coming for people just helps them to play their part more sustainably and also more effectively.
That's a really great word. I do think, and it gives hope, doesn't it, to people? And I think because in this, we've all had to be more reflective. People have been in that space through successive lockdowns over the last couple of years. People have all had to think, sit back, lean back a little bit and say, is this sustainable? What is sustainable? What do I actually want? Who am I? Yep. The bigger questions. And they've all led to much richer conversations, it does seem to me, in many respects. There's hope in that. And I do love that sense of people recognizing the need to be self-aware. And for me, just reading, doing a lot more study, slowing down and connecting at that level is being part of that journey. Mate, it's so helpful to hear you on these things, and I'm just aware of our time running out here. But any last thoughts or words that you'd like to leave with us as one of the things that we're doing as we gather is to look at dismantling some of the myths that are built up around the fivefold. And I just wonder if you've got anything to say about that.
The very simple but complex answer that I often give around that is, look at Jesus. So Jesus was the perfect apostle, the perfect prophet, the perfect evangelist, the perfect shepherd, the perfect teacher. If there's any other focal point or foundation or orientation point, you're going to be just off center or a long way off base. So actually what we need to look at of a godly expression of the apostolic is read, model. Jesus is the model and the method. Same for the prophetic. So absolutely, we need to know that we come with baggage, we come with misconceptions, misinformation, we come with hurts, wounds. Definitely, nobody comes to this conversation sort of with nothing and pure. So we need to name and know some of those wounds, those misconceptions, the caricatures, the judgments, the pain. We need to orientate and ground the conversation in Jesus and the Gospels and how he was. And then from there, ultimately, I think the best first step is, how am I a disciple who becomes more like Jesus and plays his or her part in helping my community, my church, my friends become more like Jesus or be introduced to Jesus? So you find yourself as you make it about others, you find your life as you lose it, you actually pursue maturity by helping others to pursue maturity. So name the myths, the pain, the baggage, the heritage, locate yourself in Jesus, and from that point go for us before me, and maturity and intimacy for those that do or don't know Jesus. I think that, which again, that's a very quick answer to a very deep question, but that gives you a little framework. Hopefully.
I love that. I mean, just to land on Jesus is just so important, isn't it? Because I think what I'm finding most of the time when I'm talking to people, man, is there is the way. And I think the self-awareness journey is that process of pressing into finding and locating our journey in Jesus's journey, in that way. And I feel like that's becoming more and more the way in which people are doing discipleship, finding and doing evangelism, even just sharing the story. It's becoming far more fruitful as I'm watching around me. But I do think, thank you, brilliantly articulated. Thank you very much, Rich, for all the ways in which you paint things and paint the picture here. Just to say, I do think there is so much more for people to be able to press in. We're doing these little things through Resonate, and you are doing training coaching through the Leaders Collective, through Creo, through Catalyst. There's so many opportunities for people to dig deeper on this journey of the fivefold.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, Phil, the best place in terms of my world and our world would be 5Q Central. So www.5qcentral.com is that's where the sort of tests or toolkit, free toolkit, some training, some blogs, podcast, lots of things there. So if APEST is the thing that you really want to dig into, that's probably the best to look at yourself.
Great. Well, we've got a process going on through Reach in London. If you're in the region and you want to drop in on us, we've got a series of Fivefold ministry workshops, forums going on over one a month over the year. We did Apostles Anonymous last month. We're doing on the 17th of June. We've got one coming up on profit or loss, and just looking at some of these myths and how do we forgive. And I think that is a key process in this maturing self-awareness, is forgiving where those, if maybe we don't nothing to forgive, but if we have a caricature, then we need to know how to forgive that character and release it back into the person of Jesus. So that's part of the big journey for us, I think. Thank you very much, Rich. So wonderful to hear you and to see you, mate. God bless you in all you're doing. And we'll catch you again soon. We'll collaborate on something, I'm sure, over the next year.
Love to. Love to. Thanks for having me, Phil.
Bless you, mate.